She looked back to where it all started, and at how she left when his life didn't match her ambitions. Years later, life placed her exactly where she had once ran away from, this time all by herself. Nobody planned it, nobody arranged it. This is a story of love, destiny, and simply what time does when you let it run long enough. The office smelled like new money. That particular combination of fresh paint, imported furniture, and air conditioning set too cold that you only find in buildings where someone has recently decided, quite deliberately, that they have arrived. Claudia, or Mrs. Macau as she was commonly referred to around here, had been cleaning this floor for 14 months. She knew every corner of it. The boardroom, where decisions she would never be part of were made. The kitchen, where she restocked the good coffee, not the instant sachets, the proper ground stuff in the silver tin. And this office, the CEO's office. The one she only entered when she was certain it was empty. She pushed the door open with her cart, reached for the light switch. The light was already on. A man was seated at the desk. He looked up. And Claudia, who had an MBA, who had once been an owner of a company herself, who had attended the kind of parties this building's investors held on weekend yachts, felt the mop handle go slack in her hand. Because she knew that face. And that face, calm, unhurried, carrying none of the weight she had expected to see on it, knew hers. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then Baraka said, "Claudia, have a seat." To understand what that office moment meant, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the dramatic beginning, the ordinary one. A young man called Baraka Kizito, somewhere in his mid-20s, who was in love. Genuinely and completely in love, with a woman who had plans, whose plans for a time became his plans too. He was the kind of man who took on jobs everybody else rejected. Manual labor, night shifts, the kind of work that leaves marks on your hands and exhaustion behind your eyes. Not because he had no options, but because she did. Because her education cost money that had to come from somewhere, and somewhere was him. He forgot about himself so that she could achieve her dreams. That is not a small thing. That is years. That is youth spent quietly in the background of someone else's story, believing that the story would eventually include you. He saw her through the building stages, through the late nights before exams, through the graduation he attended in clothes that weren't quite right for the occasion, but were the best he had, through the job applications and the rejections, and then, finally, the offer. The job. The one they had been working toward together. Or so he believed. It didn't take long after she landed that job for things to shift. Not all at once. That is rarely how these things happen. It was smaller than that. A comment about the neighborhood. A hesitation before introducing him at a work event. A new language around what she deserved and what she was now capable of reaching for. A language that, quietly, did not include him. Issues about class emerged. Disagreements. Then fights. The kind of fights that are really about one person having decided something and not yet being honest enough to say it out loud. He tried to hold on. He tried to adapt, to become whatever the new version of her required. But you cannot adapt to being seen as less than. At some point, the truth of what is happening becomes too clear to ignore. He was bundled out. That is the word for it. The years of sacrifice, the manual labor, the forgetting of himself, the missed opportunities of his own, gone into the wind. She settled with a man from her new world, someone whose financial bracket matched her ambitions, someone who had not watched her fail exams at 2 a.m. and stayed anyway. He did not sit down and cry over spilled milk. He knew that was not a wise decision. Not because he wasn't in pain, he was, but because a man who spends his future grieving his past is a man who has handed over both. He put himself together. He let the past be the past. And he turned to face what was still ahead of him, which, he decided, was going to be more than anyone had given him credit for. Nothing came easily. It never does for people who start from the bottom without a safety net. He kept working. Hard, and then harder. And then, as these things sometimes happen for people who stay in the field long enough, something shifted. He met a woman who saw what he was building rather than what he currently had. A woman who shared his vision and chose, with open eyes, to build with him. They started small, and they grew, steadily, without shortcuts, into something real. A company. Their company. Life became good. Their love grew stronger in the way that love does when it has been tested by shared struggle rather than just shared comfort. They could do things now. They had built something that allowed them to live, not just survive. And that is how he is able to meet Claudia here today. She does not respond to his call and sign to have a seat immediately. Instead, she stands in the doorway with the cart, trying to process what her eyes are telling her. So, I guess it is true. People do meet. Baraka Saeed. When she finally finds her voice, her reply was, "What are you doing in the CEO's office? You work here as well? As a plumber or something similar, I guess?" Silence. He was not in a hurry to answer. He could have met her earlier had he not travelled abroad to finish his studies. This also explains why she is meeting him in the CEO's office instead of the general manager, who she has known to be the CEO. Meanwhile, she remains curious and eager to drop a jab, but she has to be certain first. His appearance does not place him anywhere near plumbing or low-rank work. He seems, she cannot quite allow the thought to complete itself, way more than that. She had imagined this meeting in the abstract once or twice over the years. Not consciously, more in the way an old song comes back to you when you're doing something else and you don't quite know why. She had imagined running into him somewhere, and in those imaginings, he had been more or less where she expected him to be. Struggling, perhaps, getting by, still carrying the unfinished quality she had associated with him, the sense of someone whose potential was theoretical, never quite landing in the real world. The man behind the desk had not read those imaginings. He was lean and composed, and dressed in the understated way of someone who had stopped thinking about what they were wearing a long time ago, because more important things required the attention. His eyes were different. That was it. The eyes. She remembered them as hopeful, eager, always slightly waiting for her approval. These eyes were not waiting for anything. They looked at her with a calm that she found, to her considerable discomfort, extremely difficult to meet. He had grown into himself. That was the only way she could put it. And she, who had left him precisely because she had decided he had no more growing to do, was standing in front of the finished version of a man she had abandoned in the middle of his construction. She had left the blueprint behind, and someone else had built the house. She could not decide if what she felt was regret. She suspected it was. She suspected it had been for longer than she wanted to admit. In that silence, a lesser man would have felt the pull. And Baraka felt it too. He would be lying if he said he didn't. There is something in the human soul that, when it has been wronged deeply, wants the other person to know, wants the scales acknowledged, wants the universe to pause just briefly and say, "You see? You see what happened here?" He saw it all in a fraction of a second. The cleaning cart, the uniform, the mop handle, the way she had frozen at the door, like someone who had walked into a room and found a different country inside it. He saw what this moment could be. He had the floor. He had the title on the door and the city spread out behind him through the glass. He could have made this moment very small for her. He chose not to. Not because he owed her anything. He had settled that debt with himself a long time ago, somewhere between the second job and the quiet years when he rebuilt himself piece by piece and decided that anger was a luxury he could not afford. He chose not to because he understood something that took him years to learn. Life moves in seasons, and no season is permanent. She had been at the top once. She had sat in boardrooms and been promised VP positions, and moved in the kind of circles where the right name in the right room could open almost any door. She had made choices. Not bad choices in the sense of random or careless ones, but deliberate choices. The kind a person makes when they believe they can see farther ahead than the people around them. She had calculated. She had bet on a version of the future that made sense at the time. The bet did not pay off. It happens. It happens to people far smarter and more careful than either of them. That is not a punchline. That is just life. And the woman standing at his door, whatever she had done to him, whatever she had taken from him that he could never quite name and never quite get back, was someone he had once loved completely. Not the shallow kind of love that sits on the surface and evaporates under pressure. The real kind. The kind you build over years of ordinary days. The kind that still leaves a shape in you long after the person is gone. He did not throw that away, nor use it as a weapon. So, he sat back in his chair. He let the silence breathe. He looked at her the way a man looks at someone who was once essential to him, and is now simply a person standing in a doorway, with the particular tenderness that only comes from having fully, genuinely moved on. "Come on, Claudia," he said again, after noting how hesitant she was to have a seat. Not with a commanding or condescending tone, but gently enough to make her feel that he still cared and respected her. It was not a trap, not a performance, not the opening line of a revenge he had rehearsed, just an invitation. The most generous thing he had left to offer her, the dignity of being treated like a human being in the moment she had least expected it. "Have a seat," he said again, signalling her to an empty chair opposite to his, as he reached into a drawer and retrieved a key. Then he crossed to a safe, opened it, and drew out a sheet of paper. A certificate. She finally sat down. She kept making guess after guess of who he might have become in the years since she ended things. Had he won a lottery? Started some kind of business or illegal dealing? Her mind cycles through explanations that keep him in a category she is comfortable with, ones that don't require her to revise the story she has been telling herself. But his shoes are wrong for that story. His watch is wrong. The ease with which he sits behind that desk is very, very wrong. Claudia, how have you been? It's been a while. She hesitates, avoids his eyes, asks again what he is doing in the CEO's office. He hands her the certificate of incorporation. She reads it, his name, and beside it, his wife's. She reads the document twice, then a third time, because the first 2 times her brain kept refusing to process the information correctly. Co-owner. The word sits there on the page, official and stamped, and entirely unwilling to mean something else. She thinks about the years, his years, the ones she was not part of, the ones she had, without quite admitting it, assumed were going nowhere. She had been so certain of his ceiling. She had built her entire self-narrative on the certainty of his ceiling. She puts the certificate back on the desk. She does not trust herself to speak. Outside the window, the city carries on doing what cities do, completely indifferent to the rearrangement of one person's understanding of the last decade. "I should go," she says finally. "I have the rest of the floor to—" "Claudia," she stops. "I hope things get easier for you. I mean that." She nods once, pushes her cart back through the door, and walks down the corridor of the building she has been cleaning for 14 months, which belongs, in part, to the man she threw out of her life on the day she decided he wasn't enough. This day and encounter resurfaced a lot of things. She had come from very little, the proverbial humble background. That mattered, and it is important to say so before anything else, because it explains, though it does not excuse, the speed with which she moved once the door finally opened. When you have grown up watching opportunities pass by, you learn to grip the ones that arrive with both hands and run. That kind of focus is not always gentle. It is not always fair to the people standing beside you when you start running. Baraka understood this, or tried to. He consoled himself that it simply didn't work between them, amid the regret and particular sting of feeling like a chapter someone had finished reading and set aside. He allowed himself to feel all of it. Perhaps he was just her destiny helper. And then he made a choice to move on, focus on his life, now that he finally could. Meanwhile, on the other side, things were very good. Claudia's new chapter was a real touch of soft life, which arrived with everything she had imagined and more. Frequent vacations, a large and beautiful home, a serene and affluent neighborhood. But how did she get here? As a janitor? After a few months of employment, she met this rich man in one of the business trips. A man who presented himself as a tycoon, who had found her, he said, after searching his entire life. He not only charming and generous, but also spoke about the future in the language of abundance. She did not hesitate. Weeks turned to months, and, as it usually does, one thing led to the other. Baraka observed, questioned, and even threatened to give up, which apparently was her most cherished wish. After about 8 months of dating, she decided to completely chase Baraka out of her heart, ensuring sufficient, uncontested space for her new catch. They finally decided to move in together. A few months later, she quit her job to join him to run what he called his business empire. It seemed at the time like the final piece of a life she had been assembling for years. She told her followers as much. Post after post confirmed the life they had long admired from a distance. The treats, the trips, the tables at the kinds of restaurants where you don't ask the price. She even advised young women, of course with caution, not to let loyalty to the wrong person hold them back. A life like hers, she said, was not luck. It was a bold decision. One bold move away. She was not wrong about that last part. What she did not post, what was happening quietly behind the curated images, was a growing concern on her husband's part. He had given her a responsibility over a significant portion of his business operations. She approached it the way she approached most things in this season of her life, from a position of assumed abundance. They already had more than enough, she reasoned. Why the urgency? Why the relentless focus on targets and margins and customer satisfaction? Her husband was not built that way. He reminded her repeatedly of his ambitions, that what they had was not a resting point, but a foundation. She heard him. She did not listen. The business she managed began to bleed. Slowly at first, then with a speed that made recovery increasingly unviable. Customers who had been loyal for years quietly moved to competitors who had been patient and ready. Staff who raised concerns found themselves dismissed or belittled. New clients made inquiries and then disappeared. Word travels fast in business communities, and the word traveling about this company was not good. Debt accumulated against a revenue line that had stopped growing. Her husband absorbed the losses for as long as he could justify it. Then he could no longer justify it. The business was dissolved, not dramatically, but with the quiet finality of something that has simply been allowed to fail for too long. That seems to be how much he loved her, perhaps. What followed at home was its own kind of dissolution. Disagreements that had been manageable became constant. A stubbornness, the same resolve that had once looked like ambition, now looked like something else entirely. Her husband was a man of goals. He could not live indefinitely beside someone who treated the consequences of his goals as someone else's problem. They separated, painfully, but inevitably. The lifestyle did not survive the separation. With time, whatever the divorce allocated her ran so thin that she had to make significant adjustments. The apartment came first, downsized to something considerably more modest, in a neighbourhood she had once looked down upon from the window of a better life. She had started a few businesses to fund her continued expensive tastes, but found the same problems following her: a strange, condescending attitude and dislike for those she considered below her. A person who knew her from her days before tasting an expensive lifestyle could not believe this is who she became. Or maybe it was who she has always been, only that the character was locked in by poverty. This attitude and poor business management diminished the customer base until the margins no longer made any sense. One by one, they closed. She adjusted. She had to. And in the adjusting, she took a cleaning position at a company in her area. This is the only job she could land after months of unsuccessful hunting. It was a job that required nothing from her past, except her hands and her time. Her MBA was no longer counting as much as she had valued it, and bills didn't care. Back across the city, Baraka Kizito had been building it. He met his new woman at the right time, and with a shared vision, they build something real. This company. That is how Baraka Kizito became the man behind the CEO's desk. Not by accident, not by luck. By the accumulation of every small, disciplined, unglamorous choice he had made in the years since the day he decided the breakup was not terminal. Hard work, belief, consistency, and meeting one right person opened a path that brought him face to face with the failure of one who once thought he would never make it in life. And now, 4 things this story taught me that I want to leave with you. First, ambition is not wrong. Claudia was not wrong to want more. She was wrong in the manner of her leaving, in the contempt she carried out with her for someone who had given her years of genuine sacrifice. There is a way to grow that does not require you to diminish where and who you came from. She did not find that way. You don't have to stay small for the people who loved you when you were small. However, your growth does not have to cost someone else their dignity. Second, abundance without discipline is just a faster road to the same place. The life Claudia built in her second chapter was real. The treats were real, the home was real, the happiness, for a time, was real. But she mistook arrival for safety. She stopped building because she believed she was finished. No life of genuine security is ever finished. It is always, in some form, under construction. The moment you stop tending it is the moment it begins declining. Third, how you treat people on the way up determines who is there when you come down. The customers she dismissed, the staff she belittled, the reputation she let erode. These were not separate from her personal story. They were her personal story. The business collapsed because the relationships collapsed first. In any field, your reputation is your longest-lasting asset. It outlasts the money, the title, and the lifestyle. Guard it accordingly. And fourth, one right person found at the right moment changes everything. But only if you have done the work to deserve what they can see in you. Baraka did not succeed because a woman with connections chose him. He succeeded because, when that woman arrived, he had already been building long enough that there was something genuine for her to see. The meeting was fortune. The foundation was his. Do not wait for the right person to start. Start so that when they arrive, there is something worth joining. This story does not end with Baraka triumphant and Claudia destroyed. That is too simple. Life is not that tidy. He built something real. She is, in the corridor of his building, beginning the long and unglamorous work of rebuilding herself. One honest day at a time. That is its own kind of courage. The question is not whether she deserves sympathy. She is human, and humans make choices that hurt others and then face the consequences of those choices. And that is not a story unique to Claudia Macau. It is a story as old as ambition and as common as heartbreak. The question, the one I want to leave with you, is this. What do you, if you were Claudia, do when you are standing in the corridor? When the certificate is back on the desk and the door is closed and you have to push your cart to the next floor, do you let that moment break you further? Or does it become the day you finally, with no illusions left, decide to start? That is the end of our story today, and thank you for staying to the end. Leave your answer on the comment section below. I read every single one. New stories every week. Subscribe so you never miss any.